Good afternoon. Welcome to Life Unrehearsed. My name is Matt Del Vecchio, specializing in life transitions, downsizing in the senior living industry. It's our anniversary show. Believe it or not, it was 6 years ago today when Life Unrehearsed was started here on CJAD 800. Thank you to all the many loyal listeners for your feedback and recommendations over the years and your guest suggestions and really all your support. In fact, I'll be playing a few audio clips from some of the more memorable interviews over the past 6 years. That's going to happen later on in the show. But first, coming up on Life Unrehearsed, what not to say when talking to someone who has recently been diagnosed with an illness or disease, and really, what should we be saying? And conflict resolution tips and techniques. Not getting along with your siblings, perhaps on a certain matter, or relationship issues. Maybe it's your teenagers just driving you nuts. You're going to want to be listening in for some advice there. And just after 4:30, you might have heard of Margaret Romans in the news lately. She's the wonderful woman who just celebrated her 111th birthday. Well, guess what? We're going to have Mrs. Romans on the show and can't wait to talk to her. Hope you're enjoying this, we'll call it a cloudy Sunday, and thank you for tuning in. You know, I was working with an elderly couple the other day considering their senior living options, and the mom was recently diagnosed with cancer. And her daughter was explaining to me that one of her good friends was trying to console her. And she said, "Oh, I know exactly how you feel." Well, as it turns out, that wasn't a very good thing to say and pretty well insulted the mother. And this got me thinking, you know, it's not uncommon to hear that term. And maybe we should address this topic on the show. But what to say and what not to say when trying to console someone. So let's bring in a true expert in the field. Psychotherapist Dr. Anita Mehta. Dr. Mehta is the Director of Education and Knowledge Exchange at the Teresa Deller Palliative Care Residence. She is also a nurse care counselor and couple and family therapist at the Jewish General Hospital, and she also has a private practice as a couple and family psychotherapist. Dr. Mehta, welcome to Life Unrehearsed.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here on Sunday. I first want to begin, Dr. Mehta, by talking about life transitions and, you know, illness and disease of a family member, for example. Why is it often difficult to cope with change?
Well, I think it's really nice being comfortable, isn't it? And I think that the thought of transition or change, what people worry about the most are the ripple effects. I think I just want to take a moment to recognize that change can actually be quite exciting sometimes, you know, the idea of moving into a new house, for example, but it can also be very scary. And actually, change can really hurt if we look at death or chronic illness or even a breakup in a relationship. And I think the important thing to keep in mind is that change is attached to a feeling of loss of control, and people really don't like that. It's the sense of being overwhelmed or stressed and that departure from just sitting in comfort in the status quo. So if we want to look at why people really struggle with change, it's often tied to the lack of trust, and sometimes to trust in oneself and the fact that we can't handle the change because it does bring on a new set of possibilities or problems. I think the simple answer to your question, why do people not like change, is because it really creates a sense of destabilization for people.
Yeah, it makes sense. You know, we've got our comfort zone, right? And all of a sudden it's disrupted. The basis behind this show, Life Unrehearsed, it's how to cope and deal with this change. So granted, I think change does affect people in many, many ways. And many people struggle on how to manage that change. So from your perspective, Dr. Mehta, what are some recommendations to help people manage with change?
So when I work with people with change, I often talk about the 5 C's to adapt to the big C being change. And we look at different aspects. I'll try to summarize it, I guess, in the interest of time. We always look at the culture of change, and the other C is communication. How do we talk about change? How do we understand it? Not just for ourselves, but how do we tell other people about change? And I think the most important C is courage, acknowledging the courage it takes to actually recognize that change actually needs to be made, and then the courage it takes to kind of move forward and through that change. Another C is the conviction that the change needs to be made, and I think compassion. Compassion to self and compassion to others as you're trying to go through this. You ask what makes it easier to deal with change. breaking it down into smaller, more tangible, malleable pieces sometimes really reduces the feeling of being overwhelmed. I'm a big believer in to-do lists and writing things down and understanding how to problem solve. Sometimes if you plan ahead, sort of getting a sense of what needs to be done, that can help reframe your thinking. It's always important to take time to reflect and actually to remind yourself that there can actually be best-case scenarios along with the worst-case scenarios that you're imagining, and that sometimes really helps when you're trying to manage change.
Mm-hmm. Listening to Life Unrehearsed, Matt Delvecchio here. We're talking with psychotherapist Dr. Anita Mehta about effective communication in difficult times and how to accept and cope with change. Some very good words of advice, Dr. Mehta. I want to get back to that example where I opened it up where someone had used that term. I know exactly what you're going through, and perhaps not the best thing to say. So I want to address those, I guess. At the end of the day, I'm sure the mother's friend was just trying to help out. We understand that. And when someone is going through an illness, maybe a death in the family, a cancer diagnosis, what other things should we not be saying?
Okay. So I just want to take a minute to recognize something that you said that was really important, was this mom's desire probably to be as helpful as possible and to try to offer words of comfort and support. People don't know what to say, and it often comes from a sense of personal discomfort or just from being uninformed, and there's always a huge fear of making a mistake. But you're right, there are things that can be really hurtful or harmful, things like I understand. I had a nursing student once who went into the room of a palliative patient, and the patient was sharing about her fear of death and dying, and the student said to her, I understand. And the patient said to her, no, you don't. Unless you're in this exact same situation, you don't understand. And so saying things like, I understand, I know exactly what you're going through, are not helpful. You asked what else can be harmful. Things like hang in there, or it will be okay. Don't worry. Often minimize the distress or angst that a cancer patient or a patient going through any chronic illness with a new diagnosis might be feeling. It closes the door on a conversation of actually understanding what the person's going through, because essentially you're erasing the experience and you're predicting an outcome that you can't actually substantiate in any type of reality. Other things that can be harmful, stay strong. You will beat this. Often puts a lot of pressure. Even the term survivor that we use in a very relaxed way these days puts a lot of pressure on a patient. Almost often no other option but to survive or but to stay strong. So that removes the possibility of vulnerability, the possibility to say, you know what, I'm really scared. This is too much for me to handle, because you've just placed this expectation that being brave is actually the better option. So those are key pieces.
Yeah,
other things, and
very good point.
When you look at patients, you don't look sick. You look fantastic. You look great. So things like that, again, just automatically shut the door on important conversations that could be had instead.
You know, listening to you, Dr. Mehta, and we're talking to psychotherapist Dr. Anita Mehta, I think these are all common lines that people use just because they're not sure what to say, and they maybe get a little nervous and they want to console. And like you say, it might not be correct. So let's turn that around. From your perspective, what should we be saying to someone who recently has a diagnosis or an illness?
I think you can't go wrong if you keep things open-ended. Big statements like, tell me more, help me understand, really open the door and place the ball in the patient's court. And that just allows them the freedom to share what they're thinking. And of course they can say, no, thank you, I don't want to talk about it. But that becomes their prerogative. It doesn't become, someone else shutting them down. The other thing that's often helpful that I share with clients is go with an observation. I couldn't help but notice that you're upset when your husband left the room, that you look really sad today. If you stay with an observation, that's based on the factual, and that can open up a door. If you want to offer help or your presence for someone, saying something like, what would be most helpful for you right now? And again, that's the offering itself. It's the highlighting that you're really present, and it's asking the person what they want from their perspective. And it gives them the option of either saying, no, I'm fine right now, or coming up with a list of things that might actually be helpful for them. You can also say something like, shall we take a moment? And just offer yourself again. The other thing that I want to highlight, that it is absolutely okay to not know what to say. It's okay to say, you know what you've shared with me is really important. I want to take a few minutes to recognize that, and I really don't know what to say at all. And that's absolutely fine. In fact, that's more helpful than stumbling around and trying to say something that can actually hurt the person or shut down a conversation. So that's important. It's okay not to know. It's okay not to know what to say.
Very good point. You're making it real, making it human, and it's okay not to know. We're talking with psychotherapist Dr. Anita Mehta. Dr. Mehta, we have to head out to traffic, but we're going to, one of your real specialties is conflict resolution. You're not getting along with your siblings, or you might have a couple relationship that's it's not going as well. The teenagers are driving you nuts, or maybe you're a grandparent and you don't like the way your daughter's bringing up the kids. All these conflicts. Well, we're going to pick your brain a little bit and love to get your advice on some conflict resolution techniques.